Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is. This is What's Left that you're watching. I'm your host. My name's Larry Erickson, and we're going to be here for almost a half an hour talking about some things that I hope you find interesting enough to stay with us for that time. If you have any reactions to the show, you can send them to me directly. This is my personal email, whoviating@aol.com. If you didn't catch that, something to write it down with real quick, you can always go to my website. It's called Lotus Surviving a Dark Time. The URL will be over here somewhere a couple times during the show. You can get the email address from there, or if you prefer, you can leave a comment there if you'd like. If you do send me email, two requests as always. Include something in the subject line that makes it clear it's about the show, it's not spam. And two, be a little patient about getting an answer, because I'm just not very good at answering email, but you will get an answer. All right, with that, starting off as I always like to, where I can, with some good news. On October 30th, federal judge Colleen Collar-Cotterly of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia issued a temporary injunction blocking enforcement of the central provisions of the Rump's order banning transgender people from the military, and she did it in no uncertain terms. The Rump's memo was issued on August 25th. It indefinitely extended a prohibition against transgender individuals joining the military and required the military to authorize, no later than next March 23rd, the discharge of transgender people who are already in the military. Judge Collar-Cotterly blocked those provisions, holding that the plaintiffs are likely to succeed on their due process claims, having, quoting her, established that they will be injured by these directives due both to the inherent inequality they impose and the risk of discharge and denial of accession that they engender. She also blasted the fact that the Rump made the initial announcement in a tweet, which, by the way, is why from now on I'm referring to him as, not as the Rump, but as Tweety Pie. She blasted the fact that the announcement was made in a tweet, quote, without any of the formality or deliberative processes that generally accompany the development and announcement of major policy changes. Administration lawyers had wanted her to dismiss the case entirely, arguing that it was premature and that, quoting them, federal courts owe the utmost deference to the political branches in the field of national defense and military affairs. But Collar-Cotterly said those arguments wither away under scrutiny. She said, and I'm quoting here, the memorandum unequivocally directs the military to prohibit indefinitely the accession of transgender individuals and to authorize their discharge. This decision has already been made. These directives must be executed by a date certain, and there's no reason to believe that they will not be executed. And if that wasn't enough, she also said that, quoting her again, all of the reasons proffered by the president for excluding transgender individuals from the military were not merely unsupported, but were actually contradicted by the studies, conclusions, and judgment of the military itself. Bam. Two last quick things on this. The reason the injunction is temporary is that this is not a final ruling. It's rather that Tweety Pie's order can't be enforced while the case moves through the courts. And Judge Collar-Cotterly did refuse to enjoin another part of Tweety Pie's order, that part banning the use of funds for gender reassignment surgery. She ruled that the plaintiffs had not established that they would be harmed by that part of the directive. The plaintiffs, for their part, saw that as a very small loss, particularly since the ruling says that the military policy will revert to the status quo as it was before Tweety Pie's order, a period which would include covering surgery. All in all, even though it's about military, it's still about rights, and this is genuine good news. Two bits of kind of good news relating to two so-called white power, white supremacist rallies in Tennessee on October 28th. Why it's kinda is because it is about these bigots' banquets, but still they're fun. I like them. The first is out in Murfreesboro. The rally was canceled when, after about 30 white nationalists showed up to discover that they were facing off against about 800 to 1,000 counter-protesters, chanting things like, Murfreesboro loves, refugees are welcome here, and this is what democracy looks like. The other thing, one of the things I've long maintained is that we in our struggle for justice not only have to be determined and patient, we have to be creative. So I like this. I enjoyed the fact that in Shelbyville, not only were the 100 or so neo-Nazis outnumbered 2-1 by counter-protesters, but at a great moment, the counter-protesters offered these master race wannabes free genetic testing. Apparently there were no takers. All right, 2 more bits of good news, these on environmental issues. First is that adopted in the closing days of the Clinton administration, the roadless rule prohibits most logging and road construction in areas of national forests that are now roadless. Those lands today equal about 50 million acres, which is about the size of the state of Nebraska. The rule was popular with the public and with the Forest Service, but not with political leaders with ties to the logging and the timber industries. When the Shrub administration failed to defend the rule, indeed tried to overturn it, a group called Earth Justice stepped in. Now, after 16 years of court fights against at various times the states of Idaho, Wyoming, and Alaska, and the Shrub administration, Earth Justice may have achieved a final court victory with the rule still intact. This could still possibly be appealed, but the record indicates that an appeal would be essentially a waste of time. Now, I freely admit that it's been some time since I've really been able to take advantage of wilderness, and I actually was never a wilderness camper. But preserving what of wilderness there is, yeah, that's good news. Meanwhile, the Sierra Club has a list of 44 cities, 4 counties, and 1 state committed to providing 100% of their electricity by renewable sources no later than 2035, and to be 100% renewable for all energy sources by 2050. The good news I want to note here is that 5 of those cities already obtain 100% of their electricity from renewables. Now, none of them are particularly large, none of these 5. They range in size from Greensburg, Kansas, with a population of about 800, to Burlington, Vermont, population about 42,000. So again, it may not seem any big good news, but the point is they show it can be done. And Georgetown, Texas, population 64,000, expects to become the 6th such city in 2018. And San Jose, California, population 1 million plus, intends to get there just 4 years later. So yes, it can be done, and in some places, it already is. All of which is to the good, because we have some not good news on the same topic. According to the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, concentrations of carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere surged to a record level in 2016, reaching a level not seen in 800,000 years. The figure of 403.3 parts per million is based on measurements taken in 51 countries. Just as worrisome is that the fact that it wasn't just an increase to a new high. It was the largest year-to-year increase that the WMO has seen in the 30 years that it has had this reporting network, and was 50% higher than the average year-to-year increase over the past 10 years. Scientists fear this sort of increase could make reaching global temperature targets largely impossible. Meanwhile, the same report raised another concern. The levels of methane in the atmosphere have been at a rapid rise over the past few years, and scientists actually don't know why. There is a fear that this is a positive reinforcement cycle, a self-reinforcing cycle, where methane that has been released from natural sources produces enough methane that it helps to drive temperature increases, and those temperature increases cause the release of more methane from those natural sources, which leads to more methane, more temperature increases, and the cycle goes on. Methane is not nearly as abundant as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but as a greenhouse gas, by volume, it is far more potent. And what we have here is we have people like Tweety Pie and Scott P. Hewitt and their ilk dismissing the whole idea of climate change. And I've just decided these people, they must hate civilization, hate the future, and hate their children, because there really is no other logical explanation for this. And while you're thinking about that, here's another way that humans have screwed things up. Ocean plastic is an indiscriminate hazard. It harms fish and kills seabirds, which wash up on beaches with bellies full of trash. Turtles swallow it. It damages plankton and corals, which sometimes are found with particles of plastic wedged in their guts. For years, biologists and conservationists assumed that most sea creatures ate plastic by accident. But a growing number of studies suggest another more disturbing reason. Marine animals aren't eating our plastic waste because they are hungry or lazy or confused, but because they want to, because they like it. Put another way, the plastics we make taste good to them. And we don't even know what the ingredient or combination of ingredients it is in the plastics, in our non-nutritious, non-biodegradable, damaging junk that actually causes it to be so tasty to marine life. All right, moving on to a different topic. I've talked a pretty good number of times about the economy. Most recently, I was talking about how decades of economic stress without gain were, for too many among us, the crowbar that was used to pry open the restraints they had on their bigotry, because it's always easier to blame somebody weaker than you for your troubles than it is to blame somebody stronger. But the real issue, of course, and one that I have not addressed deeply enough or often enough, is the nature of that economy. So without getting into a long dissertation herewith are three good examples of the nature of our capitalist economy. Verizon has a program called LTE in Rural America, which relies on a partnership between Verizon and small rural carriers which lease Verizon spectrum in order to build their own networks. In October, Verizon dumped 8,500 customers in that program on the grounds that, quoting the company, they use a substantial amount of data while roaming on other providers' networks, and the roaming costs generated by these lines exceed what these consumers pay us in each month. Those consumers are spread across rural areas of 13 states. But in other words, what Verizon has said is, we make money on this program, but we don't make money on every single individual customer in that program, so screw them. You don't make us money, the hell with you. Next, as a reminder of who it is that needs to be taken care of first, Bank of America downgraded the stock of the chain restaurant Chipotle from neutral to underperform on the grounds that, in the words of the bank's analyst, an inability, quote, to get labor below 27% of sales. In other words, they're downgrading Chipotle's prospects and its stock because they say the company pays its workers too much. Finally, for now, executives from Papa John's, the official pizza company of the NFL, are blaming player protests for a decline in NFL ratings, and thus they complain for a decline in the company's pizza sales. Company founder and CEO John Schnatter said, "We are disappointed the NFL and its leadership did not resolve this. That is, they did not nip this in the bud a year and a half ago." In other words, they're saying that the NFL should have clamped down on a peaceful, nonviolent, and legal use of First Amendment rights to protest a genuine injustice because the corporation's pizza sales were more important. And with that, we're going to take a break. And here we are back with our now regular First After the Break feature, We Are Not Alone. A reminder that we are not alone on this planet and other nations have their own concerns. Kenya, for one, is in the midst of a crisis of democracy as questions about elections and their integrity drag on. Incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta was elected for a second term on August 8th with 54% of the vote. But the opposition challenged the result. And as a result, on September 1st, the nation's Supreme Court nullified the results of the election on the grounds of irregularities and illegalities by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the IEBC, which is the body that oversees Kenyan elections. The court had never overturned a presidential election before. It ordered a new election for October 17th, which ultimately was actually held on October 26th. But before that election could happen, the opposition candidate, Raila Odinga, announced that he would refuse to participate in the election, saying could not be conducted fairly, and he urged his supporters to not vote. What's more, in the period before the election, some areas of the country were hit by ethnic tensions, violent protests, sporadic arson, looting, and deadly police gunfire during clashes. Police put the death toll at 19. Human rights groups say it's more than 70. Now, most of the country was calm, but the violence was enough such that voting did not take place in 25 precincts because it was charged opposition supporters prevented election officials from delivering voting material and engaged in running battles with police. And when the election did come, Uhuru, of course, was declared the winner because he didn't have an opponent. I received, according to the IEBC, 98.3% of the vote in an election with a turnout of actually just under 39%. Now, the drama, of course, has not ended. Raila has planned another appeal to the Supreme Court to overturn this election as well, with the low turnout, the violence, and the failure of the IEBC to agree to any of the changes in election procedures he wanted, no doubt figuring in that appeal. He has also talked of the possibility of a campaign of civil disobedience to pressure the government of Uhuru's Jubilee Party, with his own National Super Alliance Party intending to establish a People's Assembly to challenge Uhuru's leadership, a development that could just mean it's a way to organize a nonviolent political protest movement, or it could signal an intention, or at least a dream, to establish a parallel government in Kenya. This is not over. And one other example we have this week is the nation of Kiribati, composed of a series of atolls straddling the equator southwest of Hawaii, northeast of Australia. And yes, I know on that map it looks like Kiribati, but it's pronounced Kiribati. Rather remote, rarely visited, despite attempts to promote tourism. It generally sees no more than about 6,000 foreigners a year, and extremely poor. Kiribati is still described as strikingly beautiful, and it's about to disappear. The atolls are at most, at their highest points, only 2 to 3 meters, that's 6.5 to 10 feet above sea level. And as climate change brings rising seas, those numbers are going to drop. But before that happens, long before that happens, the atolls will become unlivable. What locals, who are called Kiribati, labeled a tsunami on the atoll of Tarawa, was actually just a normal wave on a particularly strong spring tide, but that just a normal wave was enough to wash over one of the atoll's highest seawalls and drown part of the island's only hospital and overrun a lush coconut forest with seawater, leaving the trees to decay into a field of darkened stumps. The residents of the island continue to build and rebuild seawalls further and further inland, but they know it's a losing battle. 77% of Kiribati accept that migration will be the result of sea level rise, saying, in the words of a popular song from a few years ago, "The angry sea will kill us all." All right, next up, hopefully maybe lighten the mood a bit, we are moving on to one of our regular features. This is the Clown Award, given as always for meritorious stupidity. Our first candidate and winner of the Least Self-Aware Person in the World Award is Swiss investor and frequent commentator on business on the media, Mark Faber. In an investment newsletter he said, and I'm quoting, "Thank God white people populated America and not the blacks. Otherwise, the U.S. would look like Zimbabwe, which it might look like one day anyway, but at least America enjoyed 200 years in the economic and political sun under a white majority." He then said, and you know this is coming, "I am not a racist." Yes, you are. All right, next up is Gary Cohn. He is Tweety Pie's chief economic advisor and a former president of Goldman Sachs. Pushing Tweety Pie's tax plan at a White House press briefing recently, he referred to a typical family with 2 children earns $100,000 a year that can expect annual tax savings of approximately $1,000 under the plan. Now, some people have jumped on his idiotic claim that the $1,000 that family saved from this plan could renovate their kitchen or buy a new car with $1,000. But what settled it for me was a typical family making $100,000 a year, which is close to twice the median income, and in fact is more than 70% of American households make in a year. Gary Cohn, a man who would have to travel several thousand miles in order to be close enough to be out of touch. Next, we head into the space of just weird, and I do mean space. Latina Rodriguez Aguilera is a gopper running for Congress from Florida's 27th Congressional District to replace the retiring Representative Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. In 2009, Rodriguez Aguilera described how at the age of 7, she was taken aboard a spaceship by 3 blonde, big-bodied aliens who have communicated telepathically with her several times since. She should fit right in with all the other space cadets in the house. But our winner, oh, our winner, returns us to the glory days of when the Cloud Award was genuine stupidity. So the winner of the Big Red Nose this week is Mike Shoesmith, the self-styled executive director of something called PNN News and Ministry Network, although I can't for the life of me find out what the PNN is supposed to stand for. Anyway, writing on his, what is actually just a blog on October 19th, he argued, and I do mean he argued, he went on for some length. This was not a tweet, this is a column. He argued that if a woman wears suggestive clothing around a man, she is committing criminal sexual assault. Because you see, quoting him, when a man sees a naked or partially dressed woman, a chemical reaction happens in his brain, giving him an involuntary surge of pleasure, which he apparently regards as a bad thing. But this means that, and he turns to the criminal code now, that without his consent, she has applied or attempted to apply a force against him. Thus, he says, men are in a state of constant sexual assault by women who either don't understand the severity of what they're doing and because it's cute and they like the attention, or worse, they do know the feeling it stirs and like the control they have over men. Now, I would like to have pity on, I would like to feel sorry for him and his obvious fear of women and of his own feelings, and in his pathetic pleas for women to protect him from his own feelings by putting on some clothes and stopping the sexual assault against men. But the fact is, I can't. Because while he may be pathetic, that level of stupidity cannot be forgiven. Mark Shoesmith is a clown. All right, last up for this week, just a warning, a heads up, if you will. 2017 heading into 2018 is shaping up to look a lot like 2002. 2002, you may recall, was the year of an ongoing campaign to get the public to embrace a war against Iraq. And as time went on and the public resistance to the idea continued, the claims became more and more intense, the dangers being claimed more and more extreme. We are seeing much the same now. More extreme claims with, I strongly suspect, the same intent: war. On October 25th, we had testimony to the House Committee on Homeland Security from the chair and the chief of staff of something called the Commission to Assess the Threat to the United States from EMP Attack, about a hypothetical North Korean EMP attack on the U.S. Now, EMP stands for electromagnetic pulse. It's a byproduct of nuclear explosions. It's an intense burst of electromagnetic energy that can disrupt power grids along with phone lines, internet service, and can even fry delicate electronics. The report claims that such an attack would wipe out the U.S.'s entire technological infrastructure for an indefinite period, resulting in, it claims, 90% of us starving to death inside of a year. Scared yet? No? Well, we got more. The next day, October 26, a report from the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard University breathlessly told us that North Korea has an advanced, dangerous biological weapons program with the ability to douse thousands of people with lethal doses of anthrax, smallpox, viral hemorrhagic fever, or any one of 10 other germ warfare agents. And just 2 days after that, on October 28th, Secretary of War Jim Mattis declared during a visit to South Korea that the threat of nuclear missile attack from North Korea has accelerated, he said, and I cannot imagine a condition under which the United States would accept North Korea as a nuclear power. But just in case you can't be stampeded, there's a backup. Testifying to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on October 30th, both Mattis and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson specifically refused to rule out a United States nuclear first strike on North Korea. Because, just in case. Now, Tillerson noted that, quoting him, no president, Republican or Democrat, has ever forsworn the first strike capability, which unfortunately is true. But then again, while some of those presidents have certainly brandished those nukes, I don't recall any of them before now ever being quoted something to the effect of, what's the point of having nuclear weapons if you're not going to use them? So hang on tight. And by the way, as a footnote to this, new reports say that Mount Mantrap, the 7,200-foot high mountain peak under which North Korea detonates its nuclear bomb tests, is suffering from tired mountain syndrome, where it's been so weakened by repeated tests that the area around the facility is no longer geologically stable. During the last nuclear test at the facility, known as Punggye-ri, on September 3rd, the mountain visibly shifted with a 6.3 magnitude artificial earthquake created by the test, followed within minutes by a 4.1 magnitude natural quake and an 85-acre of the mountain visibly subsiding. Since then, the area not known for natural seismic activity has had 3 more quakes. It's bad enough that Chinese scientists have already warned that further nuclear tests at the site could cause the mountain to collapse and release the radiation from that blast. In fact, the weakening was significant enough that when an underground tunnel was being constructed sometime in October, it collapsed, trapping 100 workers. And when another 100 were sent in to rescue them, the tunnel collapsed completely, killing all 200 of them. Now, this doesn't mean the facility will have to be abandoned, and North Korea is unlikely to do so, there being, it seems, very few places in the entire country which are suitable for a nuclear test site. But it does mean that new tunnels would have to be drilled in another part of the mountain, which marks this news as clearly a setback to North Korea's nuclear weapons ambitions. Not an end to them by any means, but it is a setback. The thing is, between satellite imagery and seismic observations, U.S. intelligence services undoubtedly knew about these events, the weakening of the mountain, the earthquakes, the collapse of the tunnels, almost as soon as they happened. So I find it interesting that it was not long after the tunnel collapse that Mattis was insisting on an accelerated threat. Like I said, hang on tight. All right, that's it for this week. We're out of time. I got to get out of here. I will see you next week. Until then, as always, you have the best week you possibly can, and peace.